So this week, the Packers will be facing off against the 2-5 Jacksonville Jaguars, who are coming off a big win against the Patriots, beating them 32-16. It is important to remember that the Patriots have only won one game, so I'm not sure how concerned that makes me that the Jaguars just beat one of the worst teams in football. But I want to go through and give my overall thoughts on this game, my breakdown, my score prediction. And to start off, the Packers right now are one of the most complete teams in the entire NFL. They have a top 10 scoring offense, 7th best in the NFL. They have a top 10 scoring defense, 10th best scoring defense in the NFL. And now the Packers actually have a kicker who can make field goals less than 50 yards in Brandon McManus after leading the Packers to victory last week on the last second field goal to beat the Houston Texans. And so when we look at this game, we have to, take a look at the fact that this is two quarterbacks who this offseason became tied for the, most quarterback money in the NFL until Dak Prescott beat them both, which not sure that was the best idea to pay Dak $60 million per year, but that's a topic for another video. But right now, Trevor Lawrence and Jordan Love are both making $55 million per year. Of course, there is a difference in the guaranteed money and things like that, but these are guys who both of their organizations decided to give $55 million a year. And based on this season so far, I think the Packers have gotten the better end of paying their quarterback $55 million per year. Now, Trevor Lawrence has not been bad this season. I think he's been fine, but I don't know if he's really lived up to the $55 million per year mark, per dollar number, where Jordan Love, I think, really has, up there in the NFL when it comes to 15 touchdown passes. And so first off, I'm going to start off here looking at this Packers offense facing off against the Jaguars defense. As I already said, the Packers have the 7th best scoring offense in the NFL. 2 of those games were with Malik Willis. And I was thinking the other day, we talked about Malik Willis for 2 weeks, how great he was. And then all of a sudden, we just stopped talking about him. When he's not playing, there's not much to talk about. But it's good to know the Packers have a backup that if there ever is another injury, they can still compete at a pretty high level. The Packers are also 6th in total yards and 6th in yards per play. Now, if we look at the Jaguars defense, it has been ugly, to say it nicely. The Jaguars are the 30th ranked scoring defense in the NFL, allowing 27.7 points per game, and they are 27th in yards per game, 29th in yards per play. And looking at this defense, it reminds me a couple weeks ago when the Packers faced off against the Arizona Cardinals. The defensive numbers were very similar. The Cardinals were basically bottom 7 in most categories. The Jaguars are even worse here, pretty much bottom 5, bottom 3 in most statistical categories when it comes to the defense. And so this is a game where I think the Packers are going to pile on the points. I see the Packers easily putting up 30 plus. I'm going to have the Packers finishing with 37 in this game. I just think that when you have a high-powered offense in Green Bay that does most things really well, running the ball well, they are 5th in most rush yards in the NFL per game, 6th in rush yards per play. Josh Jacobs is 4th in rush yards. And so far, Josh Jacobs, the addition there, deciding to replace Aaron Jones with Josh Jacobs has panned out very well. He stayed healthy, and Aaron Jones last year dealt with some injuries. Josh Jacobs is getting a ton of carries and still has stayed healthy up to this point. So I just think when you have this Jaguars defense, it just hasn't done very well. You have Jordan Love, who has been tearing the league up when it comes to touchdowns, 15 touchdowns. Of course, he has led the league also in interceptions, something that we've talked about a lot this week that needs to be cleaned up. But I think when you look at the difference between Jordan Love and Trevor Lawrence, it's like, would you really rather your quarterback have, let's say, 5 less interceptions than Trevor Lawrence, but then 6 less touchdowns than what Jordan Love has when you look at Trevor Lawrence versus Jordan Love? I'd rather have a quarterback who is putting up numbers, putting up more touchdowns than a guy who's a little bit more safe with the ball. Now, hopefully, Jordan Love can clean up those interception issues, and I have a feeling as time goes by, we're not going to see quite as much. It's going to be part of his game because he is hyper-aggressive, which works out in the Packers' favor lots of the time. Sometimes it is not going to, and hopefully he can clean it up overall. Now, when we look at the Jaguars and their defense, their strength defensively is their run defense. They're currently 6th best in rush yards allowed at 102.6 per game, and they're 2nd in rush yards per play allowed at 4.2. And so the Packers will have a good matchup here against the Jaguars' run defense, which has been their biggest strength so far this season. The Packers in their offensive line, when it comes to run blocking, I don't think they're quite as good when it comes to blocking versus the run as it is, protecting Jordan Love and in pass protection. The Packers, if you look at their rush yards before contact per carry, which basically shows, how well is the offensive line blocking for the most part to open up those holes so the running back, doesn't come into contact for a while with the defenders. They're 15th, so pretty much average there. And Josh Jacobs, he's been so good after contact, third most rush yards after contact per attempt in the NFL. And so even though it hasn't always been pretty with the Packers run blocking, Josh Jacobs, his strength, his physicality, his ability to make guys miss has allowed him to still play at a very, very high level. And that's why it's important to have running backs who can, make things happen, even if things aren't blocked up perfectly. And Josh Jacobs has done a really good job of that so far. So that's going to be an interesting matchup there against the Jaguars and their run defense. Now, their pass defense, a different story. It's pretty bad. 31st in pass yards per game. That's a Jaguars defense. Pass yards per game allowed. And then 30th in pass yards per play at 7.1. And so considering Jordan Love has, done pretty good against even some of the good defenses, the Vikings did force some turnovers. But if we look at the game against the Cardinals, where I think that you have a similar type defensive unit, Jordan Love had his best day of the season where he put up, 4 touchdowns, 1 interception, which wasn't even really his fault. And so that's why I really do see Jordan Love having a really, really big day. I see this Packers offense being able to move the ball pretty easily based on what the Jaguars have shown so far on the defensive side of the ball. And one thing we talked about a lot this offseason was how there's so many different weapons on this Packers offense that can beat you when it comes to the receiver room. And Jayden Reed the past couple weeks hasn't even, played very well just from a statistical standpoint. If I pull up his numbers from the past 2 games, I have it here on ESPN. So his past 2 games, last game, Jayden Reed had 2 receptions for 10 yards. The week before that, 6 receptions for 28 yards. So even when Jayden Reed, who had been the Packers' most productive receiver, still is statistically right now. Even though he's been pretty quiet the past 2 games, we've had guys like Romeo Doubs come through big, Christian Watson a couple games before. And so, you can shut down one of the Packers' top weapons. Someone else is going to have a big day, and that's the beauty of what the Packers have here at the receiver position. Now looking at the pass rush of the Jacksonville Jaguars. They are currently 28th in pressure percentage, according to NFL Pro at 28.5%. They're 17th in sacks at 16, and they actually do have the lowest blitz rate in the NFL at 18.2%. Jordan Love so far this season against the blitz has not been very good. He's been much better when not blitz, which is the case for most quarterbacks. But it says here from NFL Pro, Jordan Love has recorded a 114.3 passer rating when not blitzed this season, 3rd, compared to 61.8 when blitzed, 30th, having been blitzed at the 3rd highest rate in the league. So lots of teams have brought a lot of pressure on Jordan Love, I think partly because the Packers' offensive line is pretty good. So if you want to really get pressure on the quarterback, you need to bring more guys. Love hasn't played that great when he's faced the blitz, so I would assume that if you're the Jaguars, you maybe want to dial up the blitz a little bit more in this game. But so far this season, the Packers' offensive line has been pretty solid in pass blocking, 13th in pressure percentage allowed. They are 5th in sacks allowed with only 11 allowed this season. And I think a lot of that also has to do with Jordan Love, his ability to escape the pocket, break away, extend plays. He's very good in that regard. So I'll give the Packers offensive line the upper hand against this Jaguars defense. Now, a couple areas where the Packers haven't been great. They're 18th when it comes to red zone offense. 18th in red zone touchdown conversion at 54.17%. And that's an area of this offense that honestly hasn't been that good last year as well as this year. Luckily, with Brandon McManus here, when the Packers don't convert in the red zone, hopefully that we will see some more field goals made as opposed to, Narvison earlier in the year missing a lot of field goals for the Packers, had been one of the worst kickers when it came to field goal percentage when he got let go. Now, after one game, McManus is 100% with his, 45-yarder, winning it for them. Is he going to make every kick? No, but it looks like he's going to have a much better chance at making the easy ones, the 30-yarders, the 40-yarders. And so when the Packers don't convert in the red zone, luckily they have a guy who hopefully can make those kicks. Now, the Jaguars do have the worst red zone defense in the league, so I would expect the Packers to have a little more success this week. The Jaguars allowed touchdown conversions 78.26% of the time. So I think when you look at this Jaguars team, it is The defense is their biggest problem. When you're 30th in scoring defense, it's going to be really tough to win many games. And so that's definitely an area where the Jaguars are, have the biggest weakness. And so that's why I think the Packers are going to have it pretty easy this week, if I'm being honest. Now, if we move to the other side of the ball, already touched on Trevor Lawrence a little bit. The Jaguars offense, he's led them to be in the 22nd scoring offense in the NFL. They're 17th in total yards, and they are 14th in yards per play at 5.6. The Jaguars do have a lot of talented pieces. I would say the biggest one right now is, rookie Brian Thomas Jr. I've had a really close eye on him this season because I drafted him in fantasy football. I think it was like the 11th round. I'm pretty sure I got him, and he's been one of the best receivers this year. He has been targeted 45 times, has 30 receptions, 513 yards, and 4 touchdowns. And so he's going to be the guy to keep an eye on the most for the Packers defense. Luckily for the Packers, their secondary has been really good, especially with rookie Evan Williams coming through and as a 4th rounder, playing as one of the best safeties in the league. He has shut down opposing talent. He has been really good against the run. He really seems like, he may be the biggest steal of this Packers draft, getting him in round 4, the way he's played so far. It is a small sample size, but so far he has, he's played as if he's one of the best safeties in the league next to Xavier McKinney. And so the Packers secondary last week completely shut down C.J. Stroud to only 86 yards. Of course, Nico Collins was down, but they still have a lot of talented receivers there. Tank Dell, Stephon Diggs. And so the Packers, the Jaguars do have some weapons there. Brian Thomas, Christian Kirk, Evan Ingram at tight end. But I think that with Evan Williams at safety now, with the way the Packers are utilizing their corners, putting Keyshawn outside mostly, Javon Bullard in the slot, Jair at corner after missing a couple games earlier in the season, I think they're really starting to hit their stride, especially in the secondary. And I think that they're going to be able to, keep the Jaguars offense in check for the most part. And as I said, Trevor Lawrence, I don't think he's a bad quarterback. I'd say he's pretty average, and that's why I didn't really agree with them giving him $55 million per year. He's 19th in pass yards per game, has 9 touchdowns and 3 interceptions. And I just think that, if he had a really good defense, if the Jaguars had a top 5, top 10 defense, I think it could be enough for this Jaguars team to be competitive. But considering their defense allows all the points that they do, I feel like you need some more from Trevor Lawrence and the offense. Now, if you look at their rushing attack, Tank Bigsby has been their most productive rusher over Travis Etienne. Bigsby this season has 67 attempts, 415 yards at 6.2 yards per carry with 4 touchdowns. And overall, the Jaguars rushing attack is their most talented unit, 12th in rush yards per game at 124.3, 4th in rush yards per play at 5.1, and they're best in the league in rush yards after contact per attempt. And if we sort of look at how they match up with the Packers and how their run defense has been this year, the Packers' run defense has been much better than in years past, which is great to see. Currently 13th in rush yards per game allowed at 114.6 and 9th in rush yards per play at 4.3. And so this will be the tougher task is stopping Tank Bigsby and Travis Etienne. But the Packers have done a pretty good job of shoring up the run. Last week against the Houston Texans, the only way that the Texans could really get anything going was on the ground. And if we take a look back at that matchup, when we have Joe Mixon in that game, he finished off with, pulling it up right here, he finished off with 115 yards at 4.6 yards a carry. He was pretty much their whole offense for the most part. They finished at 4.3 yards a carry. So even though the Packers allowed 142 yards, it was pretty much in line with what they've allowed per play this season, per rush yards at 4.3. So it was a fine day. And considering that's 9th best in the NFL, it wasn't that bad of a performance overall. Just the Texans had to run the ball a lot more because, they couldn't do anything through the air. And so I'm pretty confident in the Packers rushing defense this season. And they should be getting Devontae Wyatt back. He has, when it came to rushing the passer, he had been one of the more productive Packers pass rushers. But that's one area to watch specifically. Now, the one of the best things last week about the Packers in that game beating the Texans was the pass rush finally came alive, and Rashawn Gary had the best day of his season, which for a guy that you're paying, near the top, close to the top of the edge rusher market, you would hope to see the type of production we saw last week against the Houston Texans, where Rashawn finished with 6 pressures, and before that, in the previous 6 games, he only had 9 pressures. So he had more than 50% of his production in one game. What's that? Basically 66%. So 6 pressures. And if we can keep seeing that from Rashawn Gary, then this Packers defense is going to be that much more dangerous. The Texans' offensive line is pretty bad. If you look at the Jaguars, they're much better than the Texans' offensive line. According to NFL Pro, they're currently the 4th best offensive line when it comes to pressure rate allowed at 26.8%. They're a little worse when it comes to actual sacks allowed at 16th, so average there. So it's going to be, I think, a tougher unit to face than the Texans last week, because the Texans were 25th, I believe, in pressure percentage allowed before last week. But I think that what we're seeing from Jeff Hafley and the way that he's sort of utilizing his pass rushers, his linebackers, blitzing safeties, blitzing corners, he's finding different ways to get pressure on the quarterback. And if we look at the Packers, blitz numbers, they're 30th in blitz rate at only 18.2%. But blitzing, when you look at at NFL Pro, which is where I got that statistic, that's when you send 5 guys or more. And there are lots of times when the Packers will send like a safety or a corner, but still only bring 4 overall. Like last week, there were a couple of times where he dropped like Preston Smith back in coverage, a couple other guys back in coverage, and then blitzed Xavier McKinney off the edge. And so he's doing a lot of different things, moving guys around, moving Rashawn Gary around, blitzing the linebackers at times. And I think that he's starting to really get into a rhythm and a groove where he's figuring out how to get pressure on the quarterback outside of just, utilizing those 4, your front 4 pass rushers. He's using guys at linebacker, at safety. And so I think that the Packers should be able to get a good amount of pressure on Trevor Lawrence. And last week was the first time the Packers didn't force a takeaway. They lost the turnover battle 3-0 with Jordan Love's 2 picks, the punt fumble that hit Corey Ballantyne's leg. But they are still sitting at the most takeaways in the NFL at 2.4. And they were also tied for the 3rd most interceptions in the league. So we'll see if they can get back into the turnover category and they've forced some turnovers. Trevor Lawrence, as I said, he's done a pretty good job of not throwing picks, only 3 in the Jaguars' 7 games. But the Packers have been one of the best in that area, and I would expect to see them at least cause 1 turnover in this game, probably 2, I would say, based on what we've seen so far this season. So my overall score prediction is going to be that the Packers win this one 37, Jaguars 20. I just really don't see this being a close game, in my opinion, based on what these teams have shown so far. I know the Jaguars, they've had some close games. I just think that the Packers have so much more talent than the Jaguars overall. I know that you can never take a team lightly in the NFL, and there have been some years in the past where the Packers have played in Florida and things haven't gone well. So, you can never take a team lightly, but just based on what we've seen from them this season, I don't see this being particularly close. I have the Packers 37, Jaguars 20. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section down below. And if you want more Packers content, feel free to subscribe. You can also follow me on Twitter for more Packers content at LukeBeller3. But thank you for watching, and I'll see you guys next time.